Hi, I'm Dr. Rose Jensen. At my own family's lavish awards gala, my father, Robert, raised a glass in front of everyone and called me his greatest disappointment. No joke. No hesitation. Just a lifetime of being invisible. Finally given a label. But the very next morning, at his company headquarters, his CEO stood in a room full of executives, looked me straight in the eye, and said, "Good morning, Doctor. We're ready for you." Why was I a disappointment at their dinner table, but a doctor in their boardroom? This story is about what happens when the one they dismissed is the only one who can save them. Have you ever felt like the invisible one in your own family? Are you the different one? Let me know your story down in the comments. I walked into the ballroom of the hotel, and it was a lot. You know that feeling where the air itself feels expensive? Chandeliers the size of cars dripped crystal light over everything. The sound was a symphony of clinking champagne glasses and practiced wealthy laughter. And then there was me, in my off-the-rack navy business suit. It was the best thing I owned. But in this room, it felt like a uniform of a different class. I instantly felt that familiar cold prickle of being out of place. My mother, Linda, glided past me, her eyes scanning the room for someone important. She was a shark, in sequins. She saw me. Her smile faltered for just a second. And then she waved vaguely. "Rose, you made it." Before I could answer, she was pulled away by my brother, Ethan. He was the star of the night, shining in a custom-tailored suit. His wife Megan, dripping in jewelry, attached to his arm. My mother immediately went to him, straightening his tie, beaming at him like he was the sun. My father, Robert, the senior VP, was across the room, holding court with a circle of investors. He was the king of this castle, and I was the ghost. I made my way to the seating chart. It was a massive board, draped in velvet. I scanned the list, and scanned it again, and again. I didn't see Dr. Jensen. I finally found it. Near the bottom, Rose Jensen. Table 34. I followed the numbers past the gleaming centerpieces, past the laughing executives, all the way to the back of the room. Table 34 was pushed up against the wall, right next to the swinging double doors of the kitchen. Every time a waiter burst through, I got a blast of hot air and the smell of dishwater. I sat down. I was the only one there. I was at the table for the spares, the plus ones who didn't matter. The spare parts? I was on the fringe of my own family's celebration. It was the story of my life. The room went quiet. My father, Robert, stepped up to the small podium, tapping the microphone. He had that broad, political smile he saved for investors and awards galas. "Thank you. Thank you," he started, his voice booming. "Tonight, we honor the future of Valerius Labs. We honor our new director of product, my son, Ethan." The room erupted in applause. Ethan, sitting at the head table, stood up and gave a modest, practiced wave. My mother was clapping so hard, her bracelets jangled. My father raised his glass. "Ethan is a true talent. A man who isn't afraid of risk, who isn't afraid to innovate." He paused, and his eyes, just for a second, flicked toward the back of the room, toward my table. He didn't take the safe route, he continued, a slight sneer in his voice. Not like some who are content to hide in the boring public sector, coasting on a government salary. Heads turned, not all at once, but enough. Little glances from nearby tables. They knew who he was talking about. I was the family's public sector employee, the boring one who went to the National Institutes of Health. The disappointment. I felt the heat on my face, but I kept my expression perfectly still. I stared at my water glass. I knew what this was. This wasn't just favoritism. It's a psychological system. You see, in families like mine, to maintain their own ego, the parents often designate one golden child to carry all their hopes, and one scapegoat to absorb all their failures. Ethan was their success. I was their excuse. And tonight, my role as the disappointment was being publicly confirmed. To Ethan, my father roared. To Ethan, the room echoed. I didn't raise my glass. After the applause died down, my brother, Ethan, took the stage. He had the same charisma as our father. All teeth and confidence. Thank you. Dad? Thank you. Everyone. He clicked a remote, and a massive screen behind him lit up. I just want to walk you through the journey of our new blockbuster drug. It wasn't easy. He started his presentation. Slides of data, charts, projections. He was a good speaker. I had to give him that. He made it all sound so revolutionary. Then, he got to a new slide. The title read, Foundational Scientific Papers. My heart stopped. I knew that diagram. I knew those molecular structures. I had drawn them. I'd spent 2 years of my Ph.D. program, sleeping in the lab, surviving on coffee and adrenaline, to develop that exact genetic sequencing algorithm. Ethan was still talking. His voice, a dull drone. We built this on the back of some truly groundbreaking research. My eyes were locked on the author list on the slide. A list of sources. And there, at the top, was the key paper. The one my entire thesis was built on. Except, it didn't say Dr. Rose Jensen. It said, Ethan Jensen. It all. I felt the air leave my lungs. It wasn't just a mistake. It wasn't an oversight. This was a surgical, deliberate erasure. He had taken my name off my life's work and put his own on it. I looked over at my mother. She was beaming at the screen. Not even reading the words. Just proud of the presentation. I looked at my father. He was nodding. A look of grim satisfaction on his face. He knew. He had to have known. They hadn't just cropped me out of a family photo. They had stolen my identity. My intellect. My work. And were presenting it to the world as their own. I sat there. In the back of the room. Next to the clattering kitchen doors. And I just breathed. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I didn't stand up and scream. Inside, something didn't just crack. It turned to ice. This wasn't an insult anymore. This was theft. And they were all in on it. I just nodded. Not in agreement. In calculation. I pulled out my phone under the table and checked my calendar for the next day. 9:05 a.m. I whispered to myself. Valerus Labsekio. Compliance audit. I put the phone away and looked up at the stage, where my brother was taking a bow. Tomorrow. 8 am. The sun streamed through the glass and steel lobby of Valerius Labs, hitting the polished marble floor and making everything look sterile and sharp. There was no trace of the gala's soft lighting. This was the cold, blue light of business. And I was no longer the ghost in the borrowed suit. I walked in wearing my best, a dark gray suit, sharp as a scalpel. My hair was pulled back, and around my neck, on a government-issue blue cord, was my official National Institutes of Health identification. My lanyard. My authority. The lobby was buzzing with a nervous energy. People were drinking coffee too fast, their eyes darting toward the elevators. The big FDA and NIH compliance audit was today. Everyone knew the company's future, and their blockbuster drug was on the line. I saw them standing by the reception desk. My father and Ethan. Both in matching Master of the Universe, navy blazers. They looked stressed. Huddled together. Looking at a tablet. They were clearly waiting for the auditor to arrive. Then they saw me. My father's face went through 3 stages, in 2 seconds. Confusion. What is she doing here? Annoyance. She's not supposed to be here. And finally, embarrassment. Our disappointment is walking into our boardroom. Ethan just scoffed. A little smirk playing on his lips. Rose, my father. Robert. Said. His voice was tight. Halfway between a statement and an accusation. What on earth are you doing here? Dressed like that? My brother. Ethan. Chuckled. Don't you have work? Rose. Or did you come to watch your big brother in action? He actually winked. As if I were a child who had wandered into the office. I didn't answer them. I just adjusted the cuff of my blazer. I looked past them. At the security desk. My father, seeing his investors and colleagues watching, tried to take control. He put on his gracious public voice. He stepped forward, putting a hand on my shoulder in a gesture that was meant to look kind, but was purely controlling. "Well," he said, forcing a laugh. "It's a big day. The big government review. If you're curious, you can sit in the back and observe. See how a real high-stakes meeting is run." He was offering to let me watch, like a student, a guest. I looked at his hand on my shoulder, and then I looked up and met his eyes. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. The lobby was quiet enough. "No. Mr. Jensen," I said. The sound of his last name, coming from me, made him flinch. His hand dropped from my shoulder. I looked from him to my brother. "I'm not here to observe." I held up my ID, letting the gold NIH seal catch the light. "I am Dr. Rose Jensen. I'm the lead compliance auditor from the National Institutes of Health. I am the person you've been waiting for." I paused, letting the words land. I am not here to watch. I'm here to audit. Ethan's smug grin vanished. It didn't just fade. It looked like it was slapped off his face. The color drained from his cheeks. My father just stared. His mouth opened slightly. He looked like a fish. I didn't wait for a response. I just walked past them, toward the secure elevator bank. "You should get ready," I said over my shoulder. "Your meeting starts in 10 minutes. I was in the small, sterile breakout room reserved for the auditing team, reviewing the preliminary compliance reports. The data I was seeing was already bad. Very bad. The door clicked open, and my mother, Linda, slipped in. She looked nothing like the proud, glittering host from the night before. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a kind of manufactured panic. "Rose," she whispered. Rushing over, she grabbed my hand. Her fingers were ice cold, even in the warm room. "Rose, honey, listen to me. Your father, Ethan, they've worked so hard for this. This drug, this company. It's everything to us. You understand what I'm saying?" I just looked at her. I didn't say a word. Don't make this difficult," she pleaded, her voice trying to be soft but just sounding desperate. It's just paperwork. Isn't it? You can be helpful for your family." She fumbled in her expensive handbag and pulled out a small, white envelope from the bank. She pushed it into my hand, physically closing my fingers over it. "Here," she said, trying to smile, but it looked more like a grimace. "This is for you. $200. Go buy yourself a new blouse. Or something nice. Just to be kind in there. Stay toward the back. Let your brother handle the talking. He knows what he's doing." She was bribing me. My own mother was bribing a federal officer. The sheer, pathetic audacity of it was staggering. She was trying to buy my silence, my complicity, for $200. I was disgusted. I was about to throw it back in her face. But something stopped me. I looked down at the envelope. I opened the flap. Inside, just as she'd said, were 2 crisp $100 bills. But they were folded around a small, flimsy piece of paper. A receipt. She'd been in such a hurry. So flustered. She'd just stuffed it all in together. I unfolded it. It was a standard cash withdrawal receipt from the company's internal finance department. Cash withdrawal $200. But then my eyes hit the line below it. The source code. Fund NIH Research Grant. Code 7B44A, Valerius Labs Admin. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hand was shaking. 7B. 44. A. I knew that code. I knew it as well as I knew my own name. It wasn't some random company slush fund. It was my grant. It was the federal research grant I managed. The money the National Institutes of Health had allocated to Valerius Labs for public research. My mother hadn't just tried to bribe me. She had tried to bribe me with my own embezzled federal money. I looked up at her. She was still smiling that watery, disparity smile. She had no idea what she'd just done. She thought she was being a clever, protective mother. She had just handed me a confession. I carefully, calmly, refolded the receipt. I tucked it, and the 2 bills, into the inside pocket of my blazer. Not as a bribe, as evidence. I have a meeting to run, I said, my voice flat and cold. I walked past her, out the door, and toward the main boardroom. The air in that room was thick enough to cut. It was a long, dark mahogany table, gleaming under the cold fluorescent lights. All the senior executives were there, their faces grim, legal pads in front of them. And at the far end, looking small and pale, were my father and my brother, Ethan. Their eyes locked onto me as I walked in. I scanned the table for my seat. My 2 junior auditors were already seated, but there was no spot for me. Then I saw it, tucked away against the wall. A few feet behind the main table was a single, solitary chair. It was the overflow chair, and on it was a small, printed placard. It read, "Guest of Robert Jensen." A guest. After everything. After the gala. After the stolen paper. They still saw me as a guest. A child to be placated. To be seated in the corner. Out of the way. While the adults talked, I stared at it. I didn't touch it. I just felt that cold, precise anger solidifying in my chest. This wasn't just an insult. This was a strategy. They were trying to publicly diminish my authority before I even spoke a word. Before I could react. The main doors opened. And the CEO, Jessica Thorne, walked in. She was a presence. Sharp. Tailored. With an air of absolute, non-negotiable authority. She walked to the head of the table. Her eyes scanned the room. Landed on me. And then darted to the little placard by the wall. I saw her jaw tighten. She didn't say a word. She walked straight over to that little chair. She picked up the Guest of Robert Jensen placard. And she tore it in half. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. My father looked like he was going to be sick. My brother's eyes were as wide as plates. Jessica Thorne dropped the 2 pieces of cardstock into the trash bin by the door. She pulled a pen from her jacket, grabbed a blank placard from the stack, and wrote on it herself. She walked back to the main table and placed it right at the head. In the seat of power, directly opposite her own. It read, Dr. Rose Jensen, Lead Delegate, NIH. She looked at me. Doctor, she said, her voice clear and carrying. Your seat. The entire room turned to watch me as I walked from the guest chair to the head of the table. I sat down. I placed my files neatly in front of me. The silence was absolute. Jessica Thorne stood. Good morning. Ladies and gentlemen, let's begin. She looked at the terrified faces of her executive team. Then she turned her full attention to me. Good morning, Doctor, she said, her voice cutting through the silence. We are honored to have you. We're ready for you. Ethan stood up, his hands visibly shaking. He fumbled with the remote, his face a ghostly white. And now, he stammered, his voice cracking. I'll walk you through the blockbuster innovation, our biomarker algorithm. He clicked the remote. The slide that appeared on the giant screen was the same one from the gala. The one with his name on my work. He started talking. But his voice was just a series of noises. He was trying to explain the data flow. But his words were hollow. He was performing a script he hadn't written. And now the author was in the room. He was 2 minutes into his babbling when I quietly raised my hand. I didn't wave it. I just lifted it. Excuse me. Mr. Jensen, I said. The room, already silent, somehow became even keyer. Ethan froze. What? That slide? I said, my voice cold and clear. The one with the data architecture. Could you please go back to it? He stared at me, confused. I don't. Go back to the slide, I said. It wasn't a request. He fumbled with the remote, clicking back. The slide appeared again, glowing on the wall. I stood up. I didn't look at my father. I didn't look at my brother. I looked directly at the CEO. Jessica Thorne. The genetic sequencing algorithm that Mr. Jensen is currently presenting as Valerius Labs' innovation, I said, is registered under United States Patent Number 9. 4. 5. 5. 1. 2. 0. I let that number hang in the air. It's registered under the name Dr. Rose Jensen. I saw my father's hand, which was holding a pen, just freeze mid-air. I continued, my voice steady. It was the foundational research of my doctoral thesis, and its use is licensed exclusively to the National Institutes of Health. It is not, and has never been, the property of Valerius Labs. I reached into my briefcase. I pulled out a thick, bound document with a sealed cover page. I placed it on the polished mahogany table with a quiet, definitive thud. You didn't invent this, Ethan, I said, finally looking at him. You stole it. I turned back to the CEO. Your company is in gross violation of patent law and in breach of its federal licensing agreement. And now, we are going to discuss the immediate and total recall of all profits derived from this blockbuster drug. The silence that followed was not just an absence of sound. It was heavy. It was absolute. My father was not moving. He was staring at the wall, but his eyes weren't focused. He was a statue. Ethan looked like he had been struck. His mouth open, his face completely blank. I looked at them, and I didn't feel anger. I felt clinical. What I was witnessing wasn't just shock. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was a narcissistic collapse. It was the sound of the entire false reality they had built. The reality where they were the geniuses and I was the failure being instantly, undeniably, and publicly shattered. It was the sound of their egos turning to dust. And it was deafening. 6 months later, the reckoning was, Valerius Labs underwent a massive restructuring. They paid a record-breaking fine to the federal government and were forced to cede a significant portion of the drug's profits back to the National Institutes of Health. My father, Robert, was fired. Not quietly retired. Fired. In disgrace. Ethan was demoted to a windowless office in the basement. A golden child no more. They showed up at my small apartment on a Sunday evening. I wasn't expecting them. They knocked, and I opened the door to find all 3 of them standing there. My father, looking 10 years older, holding a bottle of cheap wine. My mother, her eyes red, holding a Tupperware container of something. And Ethan, staring at his shoes. They came in. They sat on my non-designer sofa. We didn't talk for a long time. Finally, my mother cleared her throat. Rose, she said, her voice small. We just didn't know what you were doing. How important you were. We didn't know. I looked at her. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just clear. I took a sip of my tea. No, I said, my voice soft, but firm. That's not it. They all looked at me. It's not that you didn't know. It's that you never wanted to know. And that was the final truth. I'm telling this story, but I'm looking at you now. To anyone watching this who has ever felt like they were on the fringes, the one who was always overlooked, the one who was too quiet, too different, the disappointment, the one who was cropped out of their own family's story, I want to say something to you. Directly. Your value was never up for debate. Your worth is not determined by their recognition. You do not need their permission to matter. You never did. You were always important. They just weren't qualified to see it. If this story touched you, if it stirred something inside you, drop a heart in the comments and share your thoughts below. And please subscribe so you don't miss